Last time we were here actually doing work, we were ripping the seats out of this thing, and then I went and did burnouts and messed up the 2011 and had to fix that, fix the power steering, and there's some coolant issues too, but I got all that squared away. We're still gonna rip the carpet out so we can see where we have to cut the tunnel and how much we're gonna have to cut out of the tunnel. I'm gonna pull the back seats out just because we're not gonna be running the back seat, I don't think. I want to be able to redo a lot of this wiring too. So I want to get everything out of the trunk that we can. We got a lot of the Barra parts back here. We got this part of the harness, and there's two different starters. I can't remember why Jason gave me two of them. They should be the same, I think. They look the same. I also have the gas pedal because the Barra is drive-by-wire, but this harness was cut. Need to figure out what we're doing with that. I did have an ECU too that I got with my motor from Jason at Barraswapllc, but it seemed like it would be smarter to just get an ECU that was already unlocked. So through the magic of the interwebs, I made a new friend named Bill Hooton. Bill helped a lot with the Carnage Miata Barra swap, which is really awesome. If you haven't seen those YouTube videos, you should check those out as soon as you're done watching all of mine so I can get the ad revenue. Bill is pretty much a Barra guru. He knows a lot about these cars.
This car.
He offered to sell me a harness and an unlocked ECU. It has my name on it, which is awesome. And this should be unlocked and ready to go with a baseline tune in it for 93 octane because that's all we have in the States. And all of this is already marked out to where it all has to go, where everything has to splice into, which is awesome because I really didn't feel like taking all that time to figure out what harnesses I had and which ones I needed. Plus with the ECU being unlocked, I'm sure Rev Auto could have figured it out, but this just saves time. And we could probably get more of a dyno tune at some point through Rev Auto whenever we get the car rolling. Got this for the OBD2 plug. This is for the accelerator pedal. I got the plug and everything, so that should be good to go. Another really important piece that I was missing that came in relatively quick considering there's a pandemic is the clutch and flywheel. I got this from Australian eBay. I got this from the Australian brake company. I forgot their eBay username, but they were pretty helpful. So then they shipped international and it came pretty quick, which is awesome. We're gonna go ahead and open this up. The main problem with finding a clutch and a flywheel was that it's a weird spline count for a Ford. It's 23. It's got to be this amount of teeth, and the flywheel has to be a 6-hole flywheel, kind of like an old small block Ford, but the flywheel has to be big enough for the 23 spline clutch. And the Coyotes actually use that same spline count too, but the Coyotes use an 8-bolt flywheel. So the clutch wouldn't bolt up to the flywheel, so we have this, and this should all be compatible, hopefully. It's gonna get it all as a clutch and flywheel kit, but the eBay seller kind of talked me into upgrading the flywheel a little bit. So it's not a complete kit. It should be a separate flywheel and a separate clutch. I can't even remember the brand name. It's supposed to be upgraded from stock. Alright, so the clutch is going to be blue steel. Insert Ben Stiller modeling face meme. It's a pretty hefty looking clutch. It's a very heavy package too. So if this doesn't work, it's gonna really suck because it was expensive to ship. Not like thousands of dollars or anything, but a little more expensive than what I wanted to spend. There's our disc. There's our slave cylinder, our throwout bearing thingy. Thought this was a t-shirt, but it's just a cover for the pressure plate. Pretty hefty piece. We have a clutch alignment tool. Yeah, it comes with a new pilot bearing. And the flywheel power torquer, heavy duty clutch kit. Comes with hardware and more hardware and more packing stuff. And this is a pretty beefy flywheel. With the Barra, your flywheel has to be 0 balance. It's a bit heavy. I won't be spinning this thing to like 10,000 RPMs or anything anytime soon. And here is going to be a very special piece. Hopefully this thing fits. If it doesn't fit, then we are not going to get this car started anytime soon. I ordered this from my friend Mike Allen in Australia. He is from Dominator Motorsports in Australia. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. This took forever to show up, not because of Mike or anything, but just because customs, I guess, was so backed up and they were so stringent on stuff because of the COVID-19 epidemic. I think this shipped late March and it's May 21st right now. Yeah, it's 5/21 day for all you Datsun truck enthusiasts. So yeah, this took almost 2 months to show up, but I'm glad it's here. Hopefully this fits. If it doesn't fit, then we are screwed and we're gonna have to go find some other way or maybe modify this. I don't know yet. It's a dinnerly box. Easy, affordable, tasty dinners. This is our new inlet manifold gasket. That's going to be important because this is our inlet manifold. Or as we say in the States, the intake manifold. This is our throttle body for the BA. We're probably going to have to somehow make this work with the FG because we have an FG throttle body and a BA throttle body, but the new harness should only really work with the FG. I don't know if anybody's tried a BA throttle body. It might be the same, but we need to look at the pin connections to even see if it's a 4-pin or 3-pin or what. Another engine harness, which I don't think that we need, but I wanted it anyway, just in case. And this is the BA intake for an NA BA. And then it's a lot of letters. It's gonna be the new fuel rail. This is an older style than the FG. This was like the original Barras. This is made out of aluminum. It might fit because it's a lot smaller than the plastic one, but we're gonna find out. I really wish my neighbor would shut off his music. I feel like this might work if that strut tower brace wasn't there. So I think I'm just gonna chop that thing off just because I don't feel like pulling the motor right now and I really need to figure out if this is gonna fit or not. I'm just gonna cut that off right now. You see, it's just not gonna work as it is. So now our options are gonna be to either just wait and save up and buy a plasma man, which is expensive, but that's probably what I should have did 2 months ago in hindsight. Or we could probably bash the strut towers a little bit. Most of the structure looks like it's gonna be on the center of the strut tower anyway, where this extra bit of metal is on the 65. So I think most of the structure is from that. And if we're bending it here and here, it's not really gonna lose any of its structure. I mean, maybe a little bit overall, but like I said, all of it's going to be from this extra metal that's here that's actually supporting the car. So I'm pretty sure we can take a hammer and just knock this in a bit. We could probably cut it out, really, but then that leaves our engine bay exposed a little bit more. Not that I care. I usually don't run any kind of fender covers anyway. The other option would have been to do one of those total control product things where you just take all of this out and put a whole Mustang 2 front clip on, which might be an option in the future. We're trying to keep this on a budget though, so I think we're gonna take a hammer and try to knock these in a bit. And if that doesn't work, then we're gonna try to cut them a bit. Looks like the shock and the strut are gonna have plenty of room even if we do bend these in a bit. So let's go ahead and try it. Hopefully I can find a hammer big enough to bend these up. This is old American steel. Might be a bit of a hassle. See if it fits and then pull the motor and then get back to the transmission stuff. We didn't even have to mark up the strut because you can see where the intake already wore off the paint. Annoying neighbor still has loud ass music. Went to Harbor Freight, bought a 2.5 pound hammer. If this works, I got an intake for $200. If it doesn't work, then I gotta save up and buy a plasma man, and then I have a ruined strut tower. But whatever, it's already scratched up, so what's the worst that can happen? Taking a beer break, and then we're just gonna start cutting because they only made 500,000 of these. You can see that somebody put a lot of work and time and effort into repairing these. You can see that there's some primer that probably wasn't factory. So somebody definitely pulled the motor and did a pretty decent job of painting the inside of this bay and probably fixing whatever rust was there. And I'm just gonna go ahead and cut all that out. Not all of it, because you can see that the structure would be compromised if you take this main piece of metal out. That's kind of where the new motor mount's going, and that cross piece that links the engine bay together. But we're going to try to chop it here, and maybe patch it up when the motor's back out. I got a MIG welder and a TIG welder and some metal laying around. Maybe we'll try to fix it, make it look a little pretty, but really, I really want this car running. There's a lot of people doing Barras, and I don't want to be like the 1,000th person to do it. So I really just want to get this done. I don't have any money, but I have a lot of time. And my company screwed me out all my own employment, you motherfuckers. So yeah, I'm probably quitting my day job too, so I have even less money. We're gonna chop here, leave it open, try to put the intake back in, and then probably pull it this weekend, put the clutch and the transmission in, and try to get it all together. Then we need a fuel system, cooling system, figure out the pulleys, clutch pedal, all that. But yeah, let's finish this drink and then we'll start cutting. All right. We're gonna chop up this minty strut tower on this 1965 Mustang. Cringe. This asshole's playing Thriller, and it's in May. You're only supposed to play that song on Halloween. One of my favorite parts about this car is that these quarter windows roll down. I wish quarter windows rolled down on all the cars. Look at my Fox in 2011. That'd be awesome. It lets me get nice views with my wide angle lens, and this will be Throw It Out Thursday, where I could say, hey, I want to throw all this interior out and get some TMI or something. Bleeding a little bit, just a little bit. Blood, sweat, and tears. Really can't tell, but it's pretty flat. I'm really not going to know until the trans is mounted up and this is at the right angle. Right now it's a lot flatter than what it was. It was kind of leaning back. I guess where the motor mounts were sitting, it was a little like rear biased. It's pretty close though. It's close enough that I think I might do one more little trim around here and then try to run with it. I think if I trim where the third plenum is, it's going to give it a little bit of wiggle room to where it can lean back a little if it needs to. I know we're going to have to cut the firewall a lot for the trans. And then we're going to have to mount up the trans mount to the floor somehow. I might just through bolt that or weld some metal and kind of space it down if it needs to go down. I'm going to have to measure that to the pinion angle and stuff. Need to research that a little bit more actually. But I guess that's considered a win. It does fit if you massage the hell out of that strut tower. You can see where the plenum's hitting just a little bit more on that strut tower. It's not going to hit the control arms or the spring or the shock or anything, so we're going to go ahead and just trim that up just a little bit more, and then we're going to pull the motor. I was going to try to box that out, but I think I'm just going to leave it exposed just because I don't think it's going to add that much more structural rigidity to it. Leave it open. Like I said, this is kind of like almost like a missile car. It's not going to be like a drift car. I just want this to be like just a raw car. Just a motor, some brakes, a seat, maybe 2 seats so my dog can go with me. And that's it. Still got to mount the alternator back up and figure out what we're doing with the pulleys and get a cooling system and a fuel system. The fuel system is going to be next. I really just want to fire this motor once the transmission's on, just to say that I got it running and just to hear it. I really want to hear what a Barra sounds like in person because I didn't really get to hear one at Drag Week. If anybody wants to sponsor me with a fuel system, that would be awesome. Please. Like Aeromotive or something. I need a regulator and a pump and maybe a tank or a fuel cell. We're going to clean these cuts up. I'm going to try to stitch weld the tower also where the extra metal is just to give it a little more rigidity. But I just want to get it in and done. On top of all the strut tower cutting, I think I'm going to try to cut out this part of the intake because that should be easy in theory, and that's kind of like in the middle of the strut tower, so if I cut that, it's going to like take a lot of the strength out of the strut tower. It's pretty much killed my blade. So let's talk about the transmission, which means I got to bag this up again because I don't want to mess it up. This is the T56 that I got like in February. I've just been too busy to mess with any of this. Fragile, it's Australian. Came from Queensland, Australia. Inside this thing we had shifter, the transmission support, some bolts, I guess for the shifter. Shifter for a T56 is actually a little expensive. I'm trying to throw away as much stuff as possible. That's a mess in here. More cardboard. Make sure there's no like Australian spiders in here. Make sure there's no drop bears in here. Here's our bell housing. It's a shifter, which is dirty. A transmission support, which we might try to retrofit into the car. We might just try to do our own thing. Put some rubber under it. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pick this up by myself. I don't wanna hurt my back. Heavy. Kind of already regretting cutting a strut tower because I found some ITBs that'll work on a Barra on one of the Barra groups on Facebook, and I really wish I had those ITBs because ITBs are awesome and I'd probably save a lot of money over doing a turbo. Wouldn't make as much power, but ITBs are cool. I really want ITBs on something at some point, but we've already done this and we don't have any money, so we're just going to keep going and pull this motor out and then try to get to some customer work because we need some money. Pretty much just going to cut the front brakes out because that line is going to be in the way. For some reason the straps holding the brake line on are 10mm. Don't know why. Always drain your brake fluid into a proper container and don't let it hit all your metal because it's going to rust everything, and dispose of it properly. Probably bad for puppies and kitties and stuff. You don't want them lapping it up and dying. It's usually not going to leak out unless you're pressing the brakes, so we'll do that. Let's make it a mess. I don't even know if we're going to reuse this master. I'm 99.9% sure I'm going to have to cut at least a little bit of the tunnel. I don't know how much of the firewall is going to have to go too. I'm debating on pulling the dash. The dash is pretty much butted up against the firewall, and I got all that carpet there, so when I start cutting, I'm going to have to get rid of that carpet and everything. Started doing the carpet before I went and did burnouts for that scout race meet thing where my car overheated. So let's go ahead and finish taking the carpet out at least, and then we'll see if the dash has to come out. We might pull the dash just because there's a lot of wiring that has to be redone, and we're going to get rid of the radio and everything, so that'll be part of gutting it. So maybe I'll just do the dash now. I don't know. We'll see how dirty we want to get today. I gotta get rid of this back seat too. Later's in a giant house here. And I wonder how much ass has been on this. It's a really old back seat. I wonder how many children have been conceived on this seat. Here's some random keys. Some more tech screws that hold the whole car together, I guess. And the little trees. So I guess they added a cigarette lighter here at some point. I guess the car was owned by a smoker. This isn't even hooked up anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and take this out because we're not smokers. We're tire smokers here. Seems like 1965 Mustang carpet is pretty cheap. I saw it on CJ Penny Parts' website, and I'll probably order that at some point because this thing's gonna be loud. There's probably no sound deadening under this carpet, and I want to be a little quiet. So I gotta make sure I find out what was hooked to that. That way it doesn't burn the car down. Got random hot wires. Yeah, it's another reason I really want to just take this dash out. A lot of this stuff is gonna go. I'm not gonna be running heat or air conditioning in this car, unfortunately, because I'm an idiot and I'm cheap. This is all budget. This is all budget build. Looks like this only has one screw in it, maybe two. So now we're gonna need to replace this rocker panel thing. Looks like it's made out of the cheapest aluminum. Cheapest aluminum that money can buy. Sounds like there's a mouse. I hope there's not a mouse. Kinda sounds like there's a mouse. That felt like taking somebody's sweaty boxer briefs off. You could just feel that it was heavy with disgustingness. So part of the reason I bought this car was that it looked like the floor pans weren't rusted. They were obviously replaced at some point. It looks like it was a pretty decent job. There's seam sealer everywhere. So a little bit of rust here. It's just surface rust. I took a hammer underneath and kind of banged around a little bit to make sure everything was solid. And the firewall was really solid too, which kind of sucks when I'm cutting it all up because that's the only good parts of the car, really. More lights and stuff that's just taped up. This is all got to be ripped out at some point. Can't remember what was in the glove box. It's been a while. Would like to keep the glove box, even though the back of it's kind of busted out. Hopefully I can just buy the backing of it. I mean, the glove box looks classy too. And from the glove box you can see through the firewall where the big hole is. That's where the original heater core was. I really think we got enough out to where we can start cutting if we wanted to, and it wouldn't really mess with anything. There's a lot of wires there, but we're not worried about any of them really. The ignition's got to be redone. We're gonna have to redo the lights and everything because that part of the harness looked a little messed up. Like they were just kind of putting wires wherever. So we might tidy that up too. Let's just get to the transmission stuff. One thing I noticed, which sucks, is that this rear sensor seems to be busted. Looks like the little electrodes on it are still there, but this should really be replaced. I might see if Jason has one of those because I really want to drop this motor in. So I might see if he's got one handy. That sucks that that's broke. I'm gonna get the pilot bearing in though. Means we want to take all these out. This is our new pilot bearing. This came with all of our clutch stuff from Australia, eBay Australia. It's a 6-bolt crank, which is kind of like the Windsor small blocks, but the spline count is more like a Coyote's. It was hard to find a flywheel that's, I guess, 11 inches, and then a clutch for that 11-inch flywheel. I might have been able to figure it out locally and been able to get it a little bit quicker, but it just seemed like it was quicker just to talk to somebody from Australia and get it. So we're gonna go ahead and make sure we grease this up pretty decent and hammer this in. The bearing already has a pretty good bit of grease inside of it, but we're gonna throw some more in and also put some on the outside. That way we can bang this in just a little bit easier. Don't be afraid to get dirty now. A little bit of lube goes a long way. Go ahead and clean the hole out one more time too. I'm gonna take a little bit of brake cleaner and clean the rust out of this hole actually. It's pretty clean though, once we got a brush in there. And to press this in, you just wanna take a socket that's a little bit bigger. We're using a 1-inch socket and a pretty big hammer. So the kit did come with some new flywheel bolts, so we're gonna actually use these fresh ones. Make sure you put Loctite on these. I've read different things about whether to use red or blue. We're gonna use blue just because I think we're gonna take this all apart at some point anyway, and I don't wanna have to break bolts off inside the crank, because that would suck. I'm gonna actually clean this mid plate up too, real quick. I realize this was so dirty. See that the starter is going to be right here. Clean the crank off, that way that's nice and flat. Flywheel goes on nice and smooth. You can see the new ones are a little bit longer than the old ones. The old ones were for an automatic. This actually has one way that it can go on, so you got to make sure that this is spun the correct way. The spacing between the bolts is different on the crank and the flywheel, so this has to be at a certain orientation for all of them to actually go in, or else it's going to be cocked a little bit. Basically just spin it around until all the holes line up. And then you want to torque these in a circular fashion in 3 different phases. I can't remember offhand. I should have screenshotted what we're going to do. I think it was like 20 foot-pounds at first, then 40, and then like 70. If you're like me and have no friends, just put something on the front crank and kind of jam it up into the top of the motor. This is where that Harbor Freight ratchet comes in handy. The one that I used for my power steering for the 2011 Mustang. If you didn't watch that video, this thing was like 40 bucks and I use it like every day now because it's got that little swivel and it was easy to jam up against the head. Worked out pretty good. Flywheel's all torqued up. We're going to take some brake cleaner, clean the surface, and then go ahead and put the pressure plate on. This is our disc. I'm trying to keep fingerprints off of this as much as possible. This kind of floats in between the pressure plate and the flywheel. Next, we are going to replace the slave cylinder throwout bearing combo thingy. The factory one, I mean, I guess that factory is still there, so you can see how it all bolts up. You have your bleeder line right here. Seems like a lot of people do a remote bleeder. I almost think that I kind of want to try that, but I'm going to be cutting a lot of the trans tunnel anyway, so we'll probably be able to get to the bleeder. I know T56s are pretty hard to bleed once they're all together. It's like really hard to get to this when you're doing this in like a Camaro or Firebird or something. So it looks like it's just a couple bolts holding this thing on, and we're just going to reuse this line right here. I'm not even sure what kind of clutch pedal we're doing yet because we're broke and can't afford a clutch pedal even if we did decide on one. Yeah, let's go ahead, take that off, replace it, and then try to get the trans on today. Go ahead and clean the input shaft up too. Looks like it's in pretty nice shape, but it's just a little gummy. And then this part on the pilot bearing, that looks a little scarred up from probably a bad pilot bearing. So we'll clean that up too. That might just be some like gunk on there, but we'll clean all these up. Make sure you use your flared wrenches when you're doing this. Then want to strip these fittings out, and then you got to run and try to find more. Good thing we used the flared wrenches. This was really tight. Go ahead and bolt this back up. Put our old hose in. We'll do this before we put it back in, just because it might be a little bit easier. Maybe. Looks like the torque spec on this is going to be like 71 inch-pounds. I don't even have an inch-pound torque wrench, so we're just going to give it one little eh. Put some thread locker on it too. Just a wee bit, just because. That feels good. Throw a little bit of grease on the input shaft, not a lot, not so much that it gets all over our clutch. It'll make like chattering and premature failure and all that. Just throw a little bit on here just to lube it up. I think some people use anti-seize on the input shaft too, but we're just going to use a little bit of grease. Next, we're going to put the bell on the transmission housing. If you have somebody that can give you a hand, it's probably a good idea to, you know, ask a favor. But I don't feel like bothering anybody, so I'm just going to do it by myself with some wood blocks and just, you know, handle it. Luckily, the bell came with all the hardware, which is convenient because I have no idea what size this would be. Looks like it's about 37 foot-pounds for this torque. Don't know what that is in Newton meters, but here in America, it's 37 foot-pounds. I'm gonna do these kind of in a crisscross pattern, obviously. Remember, only use Dextron 3 ATF. Probably gonna change the fluids in here too. Maybe not right now because I don't have any Dextron 3, but when it's eventually in the car. Here's some cobwebs. I don't know if these are Australian cobwebs or Maryland cobwebs. Gonna try to put this on the skate and then hump that thing onto the back of the motor. Got him to mate. That was almost too easy. I don't even have the right hardware for this yet, so I got a couple bolts that are gonna catch a couple threads for now, and then I'm gonna make a hardware store run. I'm just gonna bolt these together just to give it a little bit of stiffness. So according to our tag, this is a BF manual 4.0, 6-speed turbo type. Should be good for 10.2 to 9.10. I guess those years. This was a 2006 transmission. You can see Tremec on the side of it. These are supposed to be good for a pretty good amount of horsepower and torque without building them. It's not as strong as like a T56 Magnum or anything, but this should be a really decent transmission for what we got going on. Because it's a 6-speed, we're going to get some really good highway gears, and this should be a really good cruiser, even though we're not going to have AC or power steering or any of that. So there it is, all together, the Barra and the T56. I still got to run and get some hardware, but I could not find a face mask. I know I had some dust masks somewhere in this pile of crap, but all I could find was an old respirator that smelled like paint and Plastidip. So I'm gonna wake up early tomorrow morning and try to find the hardware to get the bell housing to the motor. We got 2 bolts in it that we found that wound up being the same thread. There's 6 bolts that are a different diameter than the other 6. So we're gonna go to Tractor Supply or Harbor Freight or something and get the right hardware. But you can see this thing is really long. We're gonna have to cut out for the shifter. That's gonna be a little bit further back than the stock shifter. And this thing altogether, it seems like it's as long as the damn car. Barras are tall and long, and it's gonna be a real big pain to get all this into this, especially with this radiator support being here. We might wind up cutting this after all, just because I don't know if I can get all of this high enough and pitched down to get into the trans tunnel. I want to be able to put the motor in and kind of jack the trans up and see how much the firewall we're actually going to cut. That's going to be a long process, so we're going to save that for another day. We got a customer car coming in and I need to make some money, because I really don't have any money for the fuel system and the coolant system and a clutch pedal and some other pieces. Anybody that is really pissed off that I cut this is all going to be painted. I'm going to paint the bay and black it out. Sorry that I had to cut this, and if that offended you, I'm extra sorry, but they only made like 1 million of these first-gen Mustangs. There's tons of them. There's probably one rotten in the backyard in your neighborhood. I really think that the end result is going to justify the means of cutting this. I'm not going to have money for a plasma man anytime soon. That would be really awesome, but that's with everything going on with COVID-19 and my job and everything, it's just not going to work out anytime soon. So this had to be done, and that intake has to be able to fit in there. This cutting here is probably going to pale in comparison to what's going to happen to the trans tunnel, because I really feel like that's going to have to be cut a lot. The bell's not super huge on the T56, but it's big enough to where we're going to have to definitely cut the firewall around the back there. But yeah, that's a big boy. I'm not sure what gears are in the rear of this. it is a 65 and it was an automatic, so maybe it was like, I don't know, probably not even 331s because it was a 3-speed, no overdrive, maybe 273s. So we might want to swap out the rear at some point on this, the rear gear especially. As much as I want to keep it 4-lug, I think eventually we're going to have to do an 8.8 in this, because depending on who you ask, this thing should probably make at least 220 to the wheels. I'm hoping for a little bit more, but because it's so light, it's just going to be a little rocket. Even though it's got all that weight from the motor now, Barra weighs like 500 pounds. It should still be way below 3,000 pounds for this thing. And I really just wanted to do a bunch of burnouts. And then maybe someday turbo it. Maybe. I don't know. We're really broke now. Thanks, COVID-19, you bastards. So that's it for this episode. On the next episode, we're going to try to get the motor and trans in the car and see how much of the tunnel and the firewall we got to cut. And we might try to get a couple other things done. We're really tight on funds because the company that I work for is ran by a bunch of assholes and they screwed me out of my unemployment, so I really have no money. I've been like 7 weeks without a paycheck. So anyway, these views really help because I am monetized on YouTube and I'm making like $4 a day, $3 a day, somewhere around there. So if you watch this video, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and please like and subscribe and maybe watch a bunch of other videos if you got really bored or something. There's probably something else that you're going to enjoy, and that gives me a little more ad revenue. Just $1 a day will feed your diabetic car photographer friend. Yeah, so anyway, thanks for watching, and everybody be safe and have a good day.